Hello, I'm JW. This is a continuation on a series about Amendment 2 of BS7671. It's the brown one published in March 2022. This time we're going to have a look at Part 7, or at least some of Part 7. There's a fair number of specialist areas in there. We're going to just cover the main or certainly more common examples of that and basically what's changed from the previous blue version. So let's get to that, and we'll start out with bathrooms and similar rooms. And first thing on the list here is here 7014143. This is new, been added in, and where selve or pelve is used in zone 01 or 2, a source described in regulation 414.3 indent 4 shall not be used. Now this particular sentence actually appears in a variety of other chapters in part 7, and it basically is all the same thing, and basically you can't use what's described in 4143. So let's have a look what that is. So this is the particular piece it's referring to, and it's this piece here in 4. Certain electronic devices complying with appropriate standards, where provisions have been taken such that even in the case of an internal fault, the voltage at the outgoing terminals cannot exceed the values specified in 41411. Higher voltages at the outgoing terminals are, however, permitted where in case of contact with a live part or in the event of a fault between a live part and an exposed conductive part, the voltage at the output terminal is immediately reduced to the value specified above. Now, this is describing a particular kind of electronic power supply, typically one that takes 230 volts AC in and may output, say, 12 volts or something similar. Might be used for lighting and that kind of thing. And it's describing a particular type of these which you can't use. Essentially, it's one where it's not actually totally separated from the incoming supply, as it say there, some kind of electronic device which has various things in it which will reduce the voltage on the output to a particular voltage. And essentially you can't use items which are described as that. Some of these are marked as sort of selve equivalent and various things. So essentially if you want to use selve power, you've got to use one of the other things, which is probably what's listed there. So a safety isolating transformer, or one of the other two items there, and not item 4. And that applies to areas with a bath or shower, and it also applies to several other chapters in here. And so it's just a question of that it's not to be used in indent 4, but of course you can use indents 1, 2 and 3. Now the next thing here is on the following page, and this is referring to what you can actually install in the various places. Now the actual zones, as in zone 0, 1 and 2, have not changed. Those are exactly the same as they were previously, but what has changed is that for socket outlets, they're now prohibited within a distance of 2.5 metres horizontally from the boundary of zone 1, that's the edge of the bath. Previously this was 3 metres, so now you can have sockets where you couldn't have them before. So it's still 2.5 metres, which for most bathrooms is going to be completely impossible because generally bathrooms aren't actually that big, but if they are, it's now 2.5 metres instead of 3. Not a really big change and doesn't really change anything at all, but nevertheless it's now a slightly shorter distance. Now next one is 702, which is swimming pools and similar items. Again, we've got some marks here which just refer to where a number has been slightly changed and full stops and things added in, so that doesn't particularly apply. This, for example, here where it's marked up as a change, all that's changed here is the word designated used to be the word designed. So yeah, really it's completely irrelevant. Now one thing at the bottom here we got in 702.410.34, application of protective measures against electric shock, we have this note, and this is where a PME earthing facility is used, and it's suggested that an earth mat or electrode of resistance 20 ohms or less be installed. Now a note equivalent to this was actually included anyway, but it's been relocated and it's now at the bottom of this page under that particular number. Essentially it says the same as it did before, but it's just been put into a slightly different location. Previously a note was here under the zone 2 item, so it's rather than just being under the zone 2, it's now under the whole item at the top there, and that's basically what's been deleted where that mark is. So same thing applies, it's just relocated to a more appropriate location. Here we can see that same thing again about the 4143 indent 4 shall not be used. So again, that appears in various other chapters, same as we saw just a moment ago. Now the only other part in swimming pools is part of this, which is special requirements for the installation of electrical equipment in zone 1, and there's various sections in there. The bit that's changed is this piece here, and the height from the floor or surface expected to be occupied by persons is at least 2 metres above the lower limit of Zone 1. Previously that didn't have the occupied by persons bit in it, so it's pretty much the same sentence. It was just previously 2 metres above the lower limit of Zone 1. Now it only applies for those that are going to be occupied by persons. So a fairly minor change there, nothing too different about that. Now 703, which is rooms and cabins containing sauna heaters. The only real change here is down at the bottom of the page. Now we can see here it's that same thing as before, so it's where you can't use supplies covered by 4143 indent 4, so pretty much the same as we've seen previously. And the one before was just a slight rearrangement of the two headings here, so nothing significant change there either. Now 704, which is construction and demolition site installations. At the top here there used to be a note which they've removed. It used to say, if the PME earthing facility is considered for use, see BS7375. That particular note has been removed from there. But if we look on the next page here, we can see that that note has actually reappeared here with an extra part. So if the PME earthing facility is considered for use, see BS7375. That's basically what it said before. And then additionally, protective bonding of all extraneous conductive parts is very difficult to achieve and maintain throughout the life of the installation. So basically it's not recommending you should use that kind of method of protection on a construction site. And say it's just moved the note and has rewritten a bit of it. A few small changes here in compliance with standards. This was here previously, but now it actually specifies certain current ratings. So plugs and socket outlets 16 to 125 amps, and those from 125 to 800 will comply with the other standard there. So again, fairly similar to what it said previously, just some of those have been rearranged. It now states specific ratings of those items. Now at the bottom here we've got 704 5228 This has been rearranged and rewritten somewhat, and we've now got this, which has got quite a lot of extra stuff in it. This is about mechanical damage in particular. Previously this was just a single sentence about surface and overhead cables. Now it's been expanded, so we've got to avoid damage. Cables should not be run across site roads or walkways. Where this is unavoidable, adequate protection against mechanical damage and contact with construction plant machinery shall be provided. Particular attention should be given to the protection of surface run and overhead cables against mechanical damage. That particular sentence is basically what was there previously. And flexible cables are subject to movement, shall be one of those or equivalent, resistant to abrasion and to water. And this is another one which has been expanded somewhat. Devices for isolation. Again, previously this was just a single sentence, which was essentially the third one there, where it starts a device for isolating the incoming supply. So now we've got current using equipment shall be supplied via an assembly for construction sites or ACS, incorporating overcurrent protection devices, devices affording proper protection and socket outlets if required. Each ACS shall also incorporate suitable devices for the switching and isolation of the incoming supply. A device for isolating the incoming supply shall be suitable for securing the off position, for example with a padlock, or loading it inside a lockable enclosure. That's a bit that was there before. And safety and standby services shall be connected by means of devices arranged to prevent interconnection of the different supplies. So that's been quite a bit rearranged there, and various parts of it have been sort of added and tampered around with. Now 705 starts halfway down a page for some reason, so that's not very helpful. It also did in the previous one, so that's not been fixed. At the bottom here, just got a note added in. You can't use a TNC system, and note is that's been added. This does not preclude the use of TNCS, so you can use TNCS on an agricultural or horticultural premises. That's not a particularly likely choice, but nevertheless you could use it if you really wanted to for some reason. Protection against thermal effects, got a note there. See chapter 42 for the selection and erection of electrical equipment regarding locations with stored materials and animal feeds, etc. So just an extra note added in there. This heading has been rewritten to something else, but doesn't really affect anything. And then in external influences 7055122, the mark here indicates something that's been deleted. It used to say socket outlets shall be installed in a position where they are unlikely to come into contact with combustible material. So that's been removed, and again it kind of fits in with the previous one about thermal effects that we saw above. That's just basically been relocated elsewhere. heading here which has been changed slightly, so again doesn't really make a great deal of difference. And again another one here which has been altered slightly as well. So nothing really too surprising in that. Now 706, conducting locations with restricted movement. There are a few changes here, mainly in the one there at the bottom of the page, protection against electric shock. Essentially it's another one of these where most of the text is the same, but it's been rather rewritten and rearranged. So this particular one has marks pretty much all the way down the side there, but the actual content is pretty much as it was. It's just been rearranged and rewritten somewhat. 708, electrical installations in caravan or camping parks and similar. A few changes here, but most of it's just renumbering of certain standards and other minor adjustments. So nothing of any particular relevance in that one. Marinas and similar in section 709. The only thing here is just this little one, and all that's happened here, it now says number 35 in table 4A2. Previously it also referred to number 36, so again a tiny, mostly non-changing change. Including that thing about not using that type of power supply we've seen previously. And there's other little changes there. We're not going to look through that one, as that's a fairly specialist area anyhow. Now 711, which is exhibition shows and stands. This is another one where things have been rearranged quite a bit, and various bits added in and bits taken away. So we're not going to cover all of that in this particular video. Suffice to say that all the numbers obviously match up with the sections referred to elsewhere. And we've now got some additional information in here, all of which covers previously, such as things along the lines of protection, isolation, selectivity, and so on. And then again over the other side of the page here, most of this has been rearranged and rewritten as well. And section 712, which is solar, voltaic or PV power supply systems. Most of this section has been rearranged and rewritten in some form, and it actually goes on for quite a few pages here. Again, a lot of it is just rearrangement and rewriting, but again that's sort of nearly 10 odd pages of altered stuff, so we're not going to cover that in this video either. 714, outdoor lighting, nothing of real change here. There's a few minor bits where they've just altered a few full stops, and some of the indents have changed slightly, but in terms of content, nothing significant there. And 715, extra low voltage lighting installations. No changes here at all, so moving on. 717, mobile or transportable units. The only real change here is this piece here, 7174114. Now this existed previously, but it's another one of these where it's been rewritten and somewhat expanded, and of course it's covering a PME earthing facility should not be used as the means for earthing for mobile and transportable units falling within the scope of this section. And then these two indents particularly have been expanded quite a considerable amount, so we've now got the installation is continuously under the supervision of a skilled person electrically or instructed person electrically competent in such work, and the suitability and effectiveness of the means of earthing has been confirmed before the connection is made, or the unit is located within or outdoors on an upper story or roof of a building or structure containing the electrical installation which supplies the unit. So it's just sort of expanding on what was there essentially. Other than that, no other changes in that particular chapter. 721, which is electrical installations in caravans and motor caravans. Only changes here are just a few items of tidying up and adding in certain standard numbers and so on. So again, nothing particularly to see here. Now 722, which is electric vehicle charging installations. There are a few items here which have been revised. This is not one of them because it's just a minor adjustment to how the text was displayed. However, if we move down here, and this is under protection of safety, general requirements, and this is TN system, and this is where you're going to have your PME earthing facility shall not be used as the means of earthing for the protective conductor of a charging point located outdoors, or that might reasonably be expected to be used to charge a vehicle located outdoors, which is basically all of them, unless one of these is used. And previously there were 5 of these, and item 1 is what's been deleted. So you can't use that number 1 anymore. Now this doesn't really make a lot of difference because nobody was actually going to use this anyway. What this used to be is it said the charging point forms part of a 3-phase installation that also supplies loads other than for electric vehicle charging, and because of the characteristics of the load of the installation, the maximum voltage between the earthing terminal installation and the earth in the event of an open circuit fault in the PEN conductor does not exceed 70 volts RMS. and there was also a section about calculating what that voltage could be and various other factors. Essentially what this was, if you have a three-phase installation where inexplicably all the loads were three-phase and they're always going to be perfectly balanced or pretty much near as, then in theory you could use this particular ident, but it's gone away, so you can't use it. In reality, nobody used it anyway, because the chance of having an installation where all the loads are perfectly balanced is pretty much zero. All you need is a single-phase lighting installation, for example, and straight away, there you go. And the main killer for this is that if you installed, particularly an AC supply equipment for a vehicle, even though you might connect it up as a three-phase, someone could come along and plug in their single-phase car, and it would just draw the full load from one phase only, so straight away it's not balanced. So in practice it was impossible. So although it's been deleted, no one really cares because nobody used it anyway, and it wouldn't have been possible to use it even if you wanted to. So you're just left with the 4 other items now. Those are the same as before. Now over the page here, this is the end of the item, so they're still numbered up to 5, but 1 doesn't exist anymore, so there you go. Now at the end of this we've got a fair number of changes, and it's this big chunk here marked with the vertical lines. Now note 1 there about BS7671 does not deal with the safety requirements of the construction of electrical equipment. That was in there anyway, just says BS7671 now. But the following section is not in the previous version, it certainly is now. So we've got where equipment to be used is not covered by a British or harmonised standard, or where there is no British or harmonised standard for the functionality of a piece of equipment used, it is the responsibility of the electrical installation designer or the person responsible for specifying the installation to establish that, number 1, the equipment meets the requirements of the Electrical Equipment Safety Regulations 2016 as amended, the Electromagnetic Compatibility Regulations 2016 as amended, and other relevant legislation, and the equipment has either a UK CA or CE or UK NI mark, and a declaration of conformity where third-party approval is required. The equipment is marked appropriately. That declaration of conformity is appended to the certification for initial verification, and when the above is satisfied, it's not considered to be a departure from BS7671. And also a note about undertaking additions or alterations to an existing installation. Now, this is here because a lot of the equipment which has been on the market for some time, which various people are selling for various types of protection, including things like the open conductors and all of that kind of thing, doesn't actually comply with the standard because there aren't any standards for it, because people haven't either written them or whatever. So what this is saying, that in the event of using some of those pieces of equipment, you need to get from the manufacturer the declaration of conformity, make sure the equipment is appropriately marked, and of course the manufacturer can then advise whether it complies with those particular directives, which basically are EU directives converted into the law in the UK. So you need to get that from the manufacturer and then attach it to your certificate for the installation. Now ideally that should not occur, because ideally there should be standards that cover this type of equipment, and then it would just be a question of selecting equipment which complies with that standard. But unfortunately there are things, of course, which do not, as standards do not exist. Now if the manufacturer can't supply the declaration of conformity, or it's not CE marked or UK CA marked or whatever else, then the only real answer here is to not install it. Because ultimately, if it doesn't comply with those particular regulations, then it's illegal and shouldn't be used, and it shouldn't even be on the market for sale. So generally, reputable manufacturers will have this available and will be no problem in getting it. But if you come across equipment which you might want to use and it doesn't have those markings, they can't provide a declaration of conformity, and they can't confirm it complies to those particular regulations, then don't use it, and it's simple as that. And if you are going to use those, then you do need to get that documentation and attach it to the certificate. Now that whole situation is not ideal. Say ideally there should be standards for these things, and those standards obviously should be met by the manufacturers, and they should declare that it complies with them. But unfortunately there are no standards for some of these devices, say like the voltage has gone too high or low or whatever, or the open C&E conductor type of stuff and all of that. So not an ideal situation, but it's been attempted to be improved by putting that in there, but whether it's an actual improvement is another matter. And the last thing in that particular one, 722, is at the end here. This is a new one. It's 8263201, and this fits in with the part 8, which we'll look at in the next video. Now this is where a device complying with 722.411.41, 3, 4 or 5 is used to protect EV charging equipment in a prosumer's electrical installation. The vehicle shall be electrically disconnected from the live conductors of the supply and from the protective earth in accordance with regulation 543.3.31012 in island mode, unless the manufacturer of the device confirms that the device will continue to provide protection in island mode. And so we'll look at what island mode is in the next video. Now, Annex A722, which is informative, it says there, it's not theoretically part of the regulation themselves. A few adjustments there. Deleted that part there because that's about the three-phase type of installation, which of course you can't use anymore, so of course that's been removed. And the other bit we've now got is this bit, A7224, guidance on voltage monitoring device as described in regulation 722.411.41 indent 3. This is new, and this regulation describes a device that measures the voltage between the circuit protective conductor of the electric supply vehicle and the earth. During a protective earth neutral failure in the supply network, the neutral of the TNCS supply is no longer considered to be reliably connected to earth, and a device that measures the voltages between the following points will fail to provide equivalent safety to the device described. So that's measuring the voltage between the circuit protective conductor neutral and the circuit protective conductor and the consumer's main earthing terminal. And the reason it won't work is on a TNCS supply, the protective conductor and neutral are connected together at the origin of the installation, so there won't be a voltage difference between them because obviously they're connected together. And the same applies to the protective conductor and the consumer's main earthing terminal because again they're connected together, so they would be at the same voltage. So that's why that won't work. Suitable arrangements include measurement of voltage between either the circuit protective conductor and a suitable measurement earth electrode, so that's going to be a separate electrode installed that's only connected to the EVSE, electric vehicle supply equipment, and that will be put into the ground somewhere suitable, and suitable means away from any other parts which may be connected to the main earthing terminal, so metal pipes and cables and all of that. Or B, the circuit protective conductor and a reference point derived from the line conductors of a three-phase system, provided that suitable precautions are also taken to disconnect the device when the supply to one or more line conductors is interrupted. And of course that only applies on a three-phase installation where you can actually access that reference point. Basically what it's talking about there is the neutral point or the star point on the three-phase installation. Now, where used, measurement earth electrodes should be located at a sufficient distance from other earth electrodes and buried exposed conductive parts and extraneous conductive parts connected to the PME earthing terminal. Because again, if you're going to put a reference measurement electrode in the ground, it's no good situating next to your water pipe that's metal, because that's going to go up to the same voltage in the event of a fault, so that won't work. And there's some further guidance there about the types of electrodes you could use and distances and voltages and so on. So this is a kind of a possibility. It's not something which many manufacturers have implemented in their devices. There's at least one which has. But again, this is going to be quite a difficult thing to do. You've got to get that electrode pretty far away from anything else that happens to be in the ground there connected to the system. And in many cases, it's simply not going to be possible to use it. But if you do want to use it, then guidance is provided there. And over the page here we've got a continuation of that. It gives you some examples of maximum disconnection times in relation to voltage between the circuit protector conductor and earth, so anything from 1 to 0.04 seconds depending on the voltage level. And there's an example here of how this could actually work where protective conductor monitoring is required. Again, this is all very unlikely to be used in reality, but say if you do want to use it, then it's available here to be used. Now the rest of part 7, which is these things here, there's not really a lot else that's changed here, just minor alterations and minor bits have been changed there. So 729, annex 729, 730 and annex 730, and then 740 for your temporary installations there. So nothing really to see on those. And finally, of course, 753, which is your heating cables and independent heating systems. Again, there's minor changes marked in the book, but most of those are just changes to either standard numbers or very minor items which don't really have any impact. So that's part 7. And I say there are some changes there we didn't cover, but generally that's covered the main items which most people are going to come across. We haven't done the medical ones there because that's a fairly specialist area, but there are quite a few changes in that particular bit. But that is the end for this particular video. So until next time, thanks for watching.